A warm welcome to your Barbados Today morning news update, today Monday, June 21st. A rigorous compliance to the island's COVID-19 protocols will not only keep Barbadians safe, but it will lead a return to normalcy, so says the island's leading infection disease expert, Dr. Corey Ford. At the weekend, government announced the removal of the curfew from June 30th, along with a steady resumption of several activities. Health Minister Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic also revealed that health authorities successfully contained 4 tourists who tested positive for the highly transmissible Delta variant and the Gamma variant from Brazil. Dr. Ford says sticking to the protocols remains the best defense.
It does not matter what variant it is. The precautions are the same. The capacity. It's 60% more transmissible, but how is it transmitted? It's transmitted by droplets, by contact. It is still the same delta, alpha, gamma, epsilon, if we get there, right? The ways of transmission are still the same. So to prevent the transmission of disease will still be the same. So whether it's delta, alpha, gamma, whatever it is, to me, the key point is that we must maintain those strategies I mentioned. Vaccination, fit social and physical distancing. And as we talk about parties, talk about social distancing now. It brings that into context as opposed to just physical distancing, right? And the appropriate hygiene practices. And the part which is often missed is in testing. When you feel sick or when you go to the doctor or you have a cough, get tested. And I think that needs to be the drive in Barbados at this point, especially among the young people, to encourage them, hey man, just get tested. Almost like doing a HIV test, just get tested, so that we can be sure that we can go back to that level of normalcy that every single person who is sitting today in the room with me wants to get back to.
President of the Entertainers Association of Barbados, Rudy Maloney, welcomes government's announcement that his members can once again host events despite the restriction on numbers. Only 150 people are allowed to attend events, and Maloney says this will benefit a small number of producers, and he's hoping this will increase soon.
The event producers who could do small events that could fall within the 150 range, $55,000, and do it successfully. That is important. The guys who do the larger events will be looking forward to another phase we be opening, right? And we will look forward that, there will be relook once we do it the correct way, and in a safe manner, that the government and the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Health, etc., will look at increasing the numbers.
Prime Minister Mia Mottley announced at the weekend there will be no crop over. Government has, however, committed to giving band leaders up to $10,000 and $5,000 to promoters, in addition to having their events streamed on the state-owned Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. In response to the announcement, tent manager Eleanor Rice says she is awaiting more details to see if it makes financial sense, given the upfront costs they would have to undertake.
As I'm understanding it, Kaduma bands will not be going on this year. And I was made to understand that they will be getting $10,000. And the Calypso tents, if the Calypso tents want to do a show, they will be getting $5,000. Now, in some cases, to pay the Calypsonians to sing would be sometimes more than $5,000. The band is a big cost as well, venue and all of that. So I don't understand yet what is happening, and I am going to try to clarify all of that as early as tomorrow morning.
Government's pledge to put a cap on the value-added tax if oil prices continues to rise is getting the thumbs up from the chairman of the Alliance Owners of Public Transport, Roy Raphael. He says the association welcomes the proposed ease given the high sums being paid by PSVs to fill up at the pumps.
Even with our buses, particularly those bigger buses, we can take as much as $350 a day in those 48-seaters, and as much as $175 a day with the average 14-seater. So whatever little that we can get from the Ministry of the Ministry of Finance, and will be a great relief for this association.
But opposition leader Bishop Joseph Adderley says government needs to clearly explain what placing a cap on the VAT will mean for consumers. He maintains government has to take the blame for the current situation and it should be prepared to ease the burden.
What does it mean to cap the VAT? Now, you get into all these technical languages, you're hiding behind your policy position. Mr. Maskell came and told the country there was nothing that government had done that has added to the cost of fuel to people in Barbados. That is not true. By imposing your taxes, you created a situation that when price import inflation occurred, with fuel coming in from overseas, your taxes on top of that will always make the situation worse. Policy formulation has to be forward-looking. And you can't say we didn't imagine that you could have had this steep rise. The world has witnessed this type of rise in energy prices.
In other news this Monday, Chief Executive Officer of Hague Communications, Joanne Hague, who's managing the public relations for the Bridgetown Transformation Project, urges that vendors along Fairchild Street in the city will not be disadvantaged. She made this clear after some vendors declared they are not happy with the proposed locations to ply their trade. Hague told Barbados Today talks were held with some vendors last Sunday in preparation for the June 30th move, but she says no directions on where vendors would be specifically relocated were given. She acknowledges there is likely to be a level of inconvenience, but says all vendors will be treated fairly.
We wanted to discuss with them the options. Now, at no given time did we tell anyone exactly where they were going. The only people in that meeting, the only vendors that knew exactly where they were going, would be the food and beverage vendors who will be allocated stalls in the middle. And that was the first project. So I am very sorry to hear that vendors feel that they have been unfaired. That certainly is not the intention, will never be the intention, because we want to make sure that every vendor in that location will be returned and into a clean area to start operating. However, what do we do in the interim? So we had that discussion. So we have not given anyone a clear direction as to where they're going, because there's some logistics that we had to work out over the last couple of days and some options.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To regional news, in the Bahamas, some 2 years after Hurricane Dorian ravaged the Bahamian islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama, Minister of National Security Marvin Dames says work is still ongoing to find people still missing.
It's an investigative process, and so we have to rely on families, all right, coming forward and saying, listen, I haven't seen my loved one. I suspect that they may have been swept away. And so all of this is taken into consideration. We have to rely on neighbors. We have to rely on persons who may be familiar with persons who they may have seen prior to, and no longer see them around. This is a very very sensitive process, we clearly understand. And if you look, for example, with Katrina, and incidents like that, it's no different. I mean, law enforcement is still working on determining, conclusively as much as possible what those numbers are.
On the international front, Western officials warned Iran on Sunday that negotiations to revive its nuclear deal could not continue indefinitely after the sides announced a break following the election of a new hardline president in Iran.
In Tehran, supporters of Ibrahim Raisi have been celebrating his election win, but for Gulf Arab states working to improve ties with Iran, experts say the new president could mean a period of tougher talks. The election of the hardline judge and cleric is a clear message, says UAE political analyst Abdul Khalik Abdullah, that Iran is tilting to a more radical, more conservative position. Analysts say much could hinge on Iran's revived talks on a 2015 nuclear deal. Raisi, who is under US sanctions, has voiced support for the negotiations, which could lead to crippling US sanctions being lifted. On Sunday, negotiators for Iran and 6 world powers adjourned talks as remaining differences could not be easily overcome, according to Tehran's delegation chief. Abbas Araghchi told Iranian state television that they were closer than ever to a deal, but that bridging gaps requires decisions to be taken by the United States. Abdulaziz Sega, chairman of the Gulf Research Center, said having hardliners in power who are close to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei could lead to an improved situation in the region, if there is success from the Vienna talks and an improved relationship with the US.
That's news, but for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as Screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also hear us on Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.